Hello crafty friends! Let's talk about some stencil hacks today. My name is Heinzel and in this video I would like to show you how to make this little art journal out of some really simple supplies that are some paper cards, some supplies that everyone has at home and only this one stencil. In this video, I would like to show you my personal stencil hacks, and I would like to show you how you can make a really beautiful thing out of only one stencil. So if you never used a stencil before, I am just showing you here how to make a normal stencil. So yeah, something like it is planned from the brand who made the stencil. So place the stencil to your paper or your card or wherever what you want to use for your journal, and then take an ink and bring the ink over the stencil. So that's the normal way it is meant. In this case, I'm using a StazOn ink, so that's a permanent ink because I want to use this result for one of my journal pages for this little art journal or card journal, how you would like to call it. And I'm just bringing the ink through this whole stencil. Here you can see it in detail. And yeah, when you lift the stencil up, it looks like this. As you can see, I tried to blend the color to the outsides a little bit so that I get a little bit more of a dimension. So yeah, let's put this away. We will use that later. So the first thing I would like to show you, the first hack is use what you have on your stencil at this time. So when you did a normal stenciling, you have this ink on your stencil, and you can also make a little piece of art with this leftover ink on your stencil. I'm just spraying a fixative to my stencil. That's an alcohol-based thing where you normally can seal your pieces of art, for example, your oil pastel paintings or something like that. And I spray this to my stencil, wait a little bit, and then I put my card on top, press it a little bit, and as you can see, you have a really wonderful negative print of this stencil. In this stadium it looks a little bit weird, but please wait until it's dry. Okay, for the next thing I'm using glass. You can use anything round that you have that fits into the middle of your stencil. So that belongs a little bit to the kind of stencil that you use. I have chosen a glass that brings the middle flower of this stencil to this circle. And then I cut out from a piece of onion dyed paper this little circle. I will just distress the edges a little bit so that I don't have this mark from my pen where I went around with it, and it brings a little bit more of dimension to this circle. Then I take the next card, I place this circle the other way around to my surface, so with the distressed side to the paper. And I try to find approximately the middle of this stencil and the card, lay everything down. Then I take my StazOn ink again and I go over this whole thing with my StazOn ink. So the goal is to leave a circle that's white in the middle of this card. In the end of this thing, you can use that to journal on. You can use that to make a focal point to your card or something else. This way you have the exact measurements of this circle and the exact position of this circle. And again, I'm trying to shade, to blend out this StazOn ink to the edges of the card. And I also try to get this frame of the stencil. So that's not always so easy, but yeah. With a little bit of practice, you can get this result. And you have a wonderful circle in the middle of your card. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful. So this is the back side, and then you can turn this circle to the right side and place it there, glue it, make a tuck spot, or whatever you want. For the next hack, we are using another card, and I saw a technique with a repositionable spray glue. So I thought, okay, let's try that. And I did that the first time when I recorded this video. So I show you what happened when I made this the first time. And I have to say, I thought about a long time if I should leave this in the video, because you will see a fail now. But then I decided, okay, let's talk about the fails as well, and let's make something out of a fail. And in my last videos, in the review of my last videos, you told me that you like to see how to solve those fails. So I had a fail with an eye on a mixed media girl, and many of you said, oh, it's really interesting how you solved this fail and how you solved this problem. So I decided to leave this here into the video. So as you can see, I sprayed this glue to the backside of the stencil, then I placed it to my card as it was said in this YouTube video that I saw the other day. And then I did it like they said. I spritzed a little bit of water, and then I used my brush colors. So, excuse me please, I just sprinkled some of the pigments of the brush color to my stencil, to this wet surface, as they said in the other video. And yeah, in this moment I thought, okay, many of the pigments of course come to the surface of the stencil, so they lay on the plastic of the stencil. And that was the same in the other video, so I show you that here in detail. And in the other video they spritzed more water to the whole thing to get the pigments of the brush colors into this little tiny slots of the stencil. I was not really happy about all this white space there, I have to say, but yeah, I thought, okay, go on and try that. So I tried to get a little bit of an irregular thing here, added more pigment, added more water, and yeah, so I went on. And then the disaster came to me. So first of all, I thought, okay, let's make a negative print of this by adding a card to this whole thing. I wanted to remove some of the color and the water from the stencil before I lift it up. So look at this really cool result. So I was really happy in this moment when I got this result, but that was only something like a leftover. And then I had this and thought, okay, let's lift it up. The first part was okay, and then I recognized that obviously the paper is sticking on my stencil because of this sprayable glue. And I had this result. So in the camera it looks not such bad like in reality, but it was really strange, and I had a really big mess to get this leftover paper away from my stencil. Then I thought, okay, with this spray glue, it would be not so a good idea because, yeah, of this fail. Then I thought, let's try this whole thing without this sprayable glue and only putting the stencil to the paper, adding the brush colors, adding more water, and then look what happens. So because of the fact that I was so impressed by the negative result that you can see on the left side here, so this negative print, I thought, why not trying this without this glue? So here you can see me spritzing the water to the stencil, and of course there's much water on top of this stencil, and that's, I think, the main problem with this brush things. But of course, we can use something else to get this off a little bit before lifting up the stencil. So I took another piece of my cards, so that's the back side of the fail card that you saw before, to get rid of the water that is here on my stencil. So when I lift it up, that I don't get a mess to my, to this stencil pattern. So another really beautiful result here with the brushes. As you can see, I love this result. So that's really, really cool. And the brushes react in a really, really awesome way. So on the left side, there was the fail, and on the right side, what you saw before. And when I lifted this up, look at this. So why using this sprayable glue when you can get such a result? So don't know. For the next stencil hack, I'm using acrylic sprays and a normal acrylic paint, a sponge, some water, and and I have to say that's my own idea. I have never seen that before. Some aluminum foil. So please excuse when the screen of the video here is a little bit weird, but I couldn't manage it to get a really clean screen with this reflecting aluminum foil. So in the first step, I spritz a little bit of water to my foil. So that makes the acrylic paint a little bit more liquid, and it doesn't stick to the foil as it would if you used no water. And on top of the water, I'm spraying this something like turquoise acrylic spray. So sorry, this color looks really weird in this camera frame, and I decided to bring a little bit more of interest with this lighter green. And then I took my sponge and I just tried to get the color in the size of the stencil to this aluminum foil. So make sure that you have a nice base of color before you put your stencil on top of this whole thing. So don't move it, leave it like it is, and then take an old fabric or a baby wipe or something like that. Press the stencil down to the aluminum foil and remove the color that you have there. So this turquoise will stay in the areas under the stencil. And now I'm adding this something like olive green, or I don't know, this darker green. I take this sponge from the other side, and then I try to get this color in the little slots of the stencil. So the turquoise is under the stencil, and this green is in the little slots that you can see here. I'm using this this little container of this acrylic paint and not a spray now, to get no green color to the turquoise areas. So now you can lift this up, and that's something like a kind of jelly print without a jelly plate. Place the card on top, press it a little bit, and if you would like, you can also make a little kind of abstract thing with the leftover paint of your foil to the back side of your card, as you can see here. So I just flip the aluminum foil over this back side of the card to get this really cool, something like a print to the backside of my card, and I can use it for an art journaling page or something like that in the end. So as you can see, the same stencil and a totally different result with this technique. And I love that this is not such clear. It's visible that there are something like flowers or something like that. You could use a black pen or something like that to make some really beautiful art journaling page out of this, or some doodling or that stuff. And that's, for me, a really cool result. So don't wash this, but spray this stencil with a little bit of water now to get another print of this. And that's one of my favorite hacks with stencils, to get this leftover paint to a new page. So sometimes these negative prints are more interesting and give more inspiration to me than the stenciling itself. So look at this. Isn't that cool? I'm thinking about mermaids, I'm thinking about blue butterflies and that stuff when I see this. And that's, I think, a really cool thing. And at the same time, you can clean your stencil very easy without wasting any paint or something like that. And I promise you, when this is dry, it looks really, really awesome. Of course, you can do this with any color combinations that you can imagine, but I would recommend to use acrylic paint for this technique. Because it's a little bit more, it's simply fine for this technique. So let me say it like this. And also with the rest of this whole stuff, you can make some really cool patterns. I am using here the leftovers, so the cut-offs of my cards. I made these cards out of simple papers, 200-gram papers, and that were the leftovers that you've seen a second before. And for the next hack, I'm using my original stenciling from the beginning. So where I stenciled this thing with the StazOn ink. And now I would like to try something with a black pen. So the first thing I do is I find the position, the original position of the stencil, and then I move it a little bit, only some millimeters, to one side. So it's, your personal preference. I moved it the right side, so that I have this little white slots there. And then I took a black fine pen to get some lines here, something like a doodling, something like a really weird shading or something like that. And now we are coming to some point where it begins to become an art journaling page, I think. So the goal was to bring some more interest into this stencil, especially when you use a stencil more than one time in one journal, for example, in a junk journal or something like that, and you want to bring some interest to this stencil. I would like to show that you can do it even if you only use this normal ink and a black pen. So you can get really interesting results. Excuse me, please, by putting only these black elements there. For the frame, I tried to fill these little slots with black pen, so with this black ink, so completely, so that you get the imagination of a frame around it. Very interesting for art journaling pages and that stuff. And my black pen was not such successful here. As you can see, it's a little bit out of ink, but I think this result is really, really cool. And I think this dimension of this is a little bit destroyed now, and at the same time it has more dimension. I can't explain that, but it's really weird. So of course you can start doodling here now. You can also add some color or something like that. But please make sure when you want to work with water or something like that, that you used a waterproof pen before, otherwise you would destroy the whole thing. In this case, as I said, I used the StazOn ink, that's water proof, and also this black pen is waterproof, because in the next step I want to add some more shading. So as you can see, you can also use a white pen for this, makes really cool details and that stuff. And then in the next step, I would like to show you how I brought out this middle part of the flower with some shadings. Here I show you a really light shading that you can do with a normal pen. If you want it a little bit darker, you can use a Stabilo All pen, as you can see me doing here. And for the first blending, I used this blending tool, as you could see, and then I added more of the black and blended it, added more black, blended it, added more black, and so on. This Stabilo All pen is a water-soluble pen. It's something like a coloring pen, but it's water-soluble. So you can take a water brush, like here, and bring this color around this middle flower. or whatever pattern your stencil has, to bring this out and to let it look like it really stands out like a three-dimensional thing in the middle of this card. And I think that's a really cool effect with this Stabilo oil pen. You can also take a really fine black pen and make more detailed doodling to this whole stuff. So I started here with this middle flower and a really thin black pen, also waterproof. And I just want to show you what's possible with doodling in this little slots of a stencil. So especially when you are a beginner, you can use this stencil as the start of your doodling. So sometimes we have really big problems to get this doodling in the right way and with the right measurements and that stuff. And you can use this stencil as a little help for your doodling. So I can lift it up and look what I have under it, because it's really hard to imagine how it looks when the stencil is on top of this. And here I just decided to get some black frames around these lines because I wanted them to stand them out a little bit more. But of course that belongs, totally belongs to the pattern of your stencil, what you can do with it. And yeah, when I was happy with this, of course you can do the whole stencil, but I decided to make only this little flower in the middle. And when I finished this, I decided, okay, let's use the brushes again and let's make a little combination of this brush of flowers I showed you in the videos before and this doodling. So I always wanted to try that, and I thought, okay, normally I would do it the other way around. I would do my flowers first and then doodle around, or I would do my brush leaves first and then make the doodling. Of course, that would be another way to do it, but here you have the focal point in the middle of the card, and you can go around with that things that you have in mind. So I used different kinds of this brush powders, so that are water soluble, something like watercolor powders, and I just make some little dots there with the water and try to bring the powder only there where the water is. And for the spritzing and the splatters, I used the color from the leaves. I just dipped my paintbrush into them and then spritzed a little bit around the leaves. For these little dots, I found out a really cool trick. Make some hills of water to your page and then bring the color from these little containers, these brush colors, to these little hills of the water. And you will see that's really, really cool when this is dry. I don't go into this with a paintbrush. I just leave it like it is and let it air dry. So let's play around with a little bit more, something like bigger dots here. So I just did this here so that you can see a little bit more in detail how this brush powders react. So that's, I think, a really cool contrast to this doodling in the middle. And after I recorded this video, I was a little bit sad because I thought, okay, I should have done a little bit more doodling to this. But of course, you can add the stencil when you have finished this and when everything is dry, and add more doodling to this card. For the next hack, I would like to use some white gesso, a palette knife, and my acrylic sprays again. This time I've chosen red and yellow. Let's take another card and the stencil from before. And I just put some gesso to my protection paper there on my table. I pressed the stencil to the paper. Of course, you can also use some masking tape or something like that to fix that to your table. If you are not sure if you can handle that, to have it in place the whole time. So when you did this step, the stencil will stick to your card very, very well, and you have no problems with that whole stuff. In the next step, I sprayed some of this acrylic paints, And please protect your other things. So while I was recording, I didn't recognize that I spritzed a little bit of this thing to my kitchen wall. So please be a little bit careful. And then I took the palette knife and brought the color in the direction my emotions told me. So I can't describe how I did this because I did it totally intuitive and that stuff. So the thing is that you will get a really, really dimensional thing, and look at this structure. So with this gesso under the acrylic paint, you get a really visible and touchable thing to your card. I think that's really cool. And of course the colors are mixing up a little bit better with the gesso under it. So yeah, I think it's a really cool effect. As you know me, of course, I'm using this here now to make some mock-up prints, and using my leftover pieces here from the card cutting to make this cool print. And there in the back side, in the background, you could see the spritzing. So where I protected the original card, this yellow spritzes are this thing that spritzed to this thing when I protected the other card. So I think that's also a really cool thing. And then I thought, okay, let's go really messy. I took my wet stencil and brought it to the leftover paint that I had on my protection paper there, so I don't want it to waste this color. And then I went over this with my fingers, with my palette knife. I took the whole stuff that I had on my table to get this really cool orange color, and I put it there to this stencil. Then I took the card and pressed it exactly there where the stencil was in this paint, and this is the result I got from it, and I was really surprised, so because it was really much paint until this point. And then I decided to take this off here and make a little bit more detailed print of this. So I placed it to another card and took my palette knife, went over it really carefully. Please excuse that I'm out of frame here, but my space was so small that I couldn't manage that with this wet paint there on the bottom of this table. And as you can see, I just took the rest of the paint to bring it to this stencil, but not all over this stencil, but only in some areas where I thought that could be a nice background for some art journaling page or something like that. So that I get a really clear print on the left side, so that was the plan, and a little bit more abstract thing on the right side of this piece of the card. And then I thought, okay, I want some yellow. And sometimes it's, the plan is there and then you decide to do something else. But that's, I think the interesting thing about this, playing around. Using all these hacks in different variations. That's the plan. And when I lifted it up, I was so surprised. You can't believe it. So this looks something like a jelly print, something like a really abstract thing, something that I would love to use in an art journal or something like that. So that was part 1 of this video. I hope you enjoyed all these little hacks and tricks and tips. Hopefully it was not too weird, but I want to show you that you can combine all these tricks, that you can combine all those hacks with each other to make really beautiful results, and that you don't need so much expensive art supplies or something like that. Even if you have only one stencil at home, you can do this really different but beautiful results. In the next part of the video, I would like to show you in a little speed up way how I decorated these cards with some butterflies and some other fuzzy cutting images, some vintage children and people. And I have to say, this is a simple decoration. So what you will see in the next video is the most simplest way to get a beautiful result out of these cards. And in the third part of the video, I would like to show you the finished result. So I made a little something like an art journal out of these cards. And I would like to show you how that came out in the third part of the video. And I also would like to show you in that video how I made a little bag for this art journal out of my protection paper from the table. So that what you saw in the end of this video with this orange color on it, I have taken this and made a little bag for my journal. So that's part 3 of this whole stuff. If you like this video, I would be really happy if you would like to subscribe to my channel, and if you would like to see more of this crazy art stuff that I'm doing here. Thank you very much for watching. I would be really happy if we see the next time, and until then I say thank you very much for watching and being here with me, and bye bye.